on that quite a bit about the importance of nutrition. And so we like to come together and bring you guys information about different lifestyle ways to incorporate healthy nutrition into your lifestyle. In particular, we're hearing a lot of buzz about the ketogenic diet right now and its health benefits. We hear the opposite as well about why it's not good for you, why it's not good for a CrossFitter. So we're going to kind of sort through all of that and debunk some of the myths and answer any questions that you might have as well. Dr. Kurt has been CrossFitting with us since 2012, and he is super knowledgeable about all things, and so he's going to take it from here.
No pressure.
I know. Jeez. Yeah, thanks for coming out this morning. I was actually praying for snow and ice because I was going to be majorly in the doghouse. Dre and I have been planning this for, I don't know, a couple months. We finally settled on a date, and then last minute as parents, we're like, hey, let's sign our oldest up for soccer. And so this morning was going to be his first soccer game ever of any of our kids, and I was going to have to miss it, so not in the doghouse anymore this weekend. So thanks for still coming out and enjoying it. But that's me. Not that important, so it's more the message than the messenger. But I think probably the big thing today is just to kind of, whether you're a CrossFitter or not, I think it can be benefit and help in either situation. But also just finding out more what's right opposed to like trying to be right. So you'll have the diehard keto, the diehard paleo, whatever, and it almost gets treated as a religion and rules of living opposed to like a tool to help you maintain your health goals. And so if you're new to CrossFit, actually if you're not new to CrossFit, this might be new to you. When most people hear about CrossFit, what do they think of? Crazy exercisers, speed exercisers, right? That's like the tipping point of what CrossFit really is. And that's one component of it and one piece of it. What really it is, if you ever hear the founder of CrossFit speak, Greg Glassman, he looks at CrossFit more as a healthcare delivery system opposed to a sport. And so when you look at their theoretical hierarchy of CrossFit, what's at the bottom of that? Nutrition. Where do most people start? Trying to snatch. Yeah. And so they've missed a lot of this hierarchy type of thing in there. And so the nutrition component's like the massively key component, and I would say not just for CrossFit, for the sport aspect, but for healthcare in general, because we have 86% spending in healthcare is on chronic illness. And so when you hear chronic illness, what that says to me is this is lifestyle illness. What we've chosen, what we've been exposed to, what we experience, and the accumulation of those things until we finally have a tipping point and we don't feel well. And so in my practice, nutrition is going to be probably the biggest component of it and switching people, especially in a macro-focused kind of component that we're going to talk about here today. And it's not to bash on healthcare, like you just got to know where your role is. So in our healthcare system, what are the two options we mostly get? Drugs and surgery, right? And what if your arm is about to fall off and you're bleeding out and you're concussed? Are those appropriate for you? Absolutely. Yes. Give me the drugs and surgery. So think of traditional medicine as the fire department. And if your house is on fire, they come out, they have axes, they have fire hoses, they blast down your door, maybe break a wall, but they stop the fire, save your house, and you're thankful. Who do you call the next day to build your house back up? A contractor. No one would ever call the fire department back and be like, hey, I need help painting and hanging the blinds and all that type of stuff. And so there's healthcare system emergency stuff, healthcare system chronic stuff, and today's more the chronic illness aspect of it. So not to poo-poo on the emergency, but not what we're talking about today. Now, I have my own pyramid where I look at disease not as separate issues or separate diagnoses, but manifestation of one thing, and that's the cell. This is where my background was. I was in biochemistry. In my undergrad days, I worked on genetic sequencing of bacteria. And the biggest lesson wasn't necessarily the gene sequence of those things. It was that we had to make these petri dishes. And so I had to put a cell in the petri dish, if you guys remember those things with the jelly and all that. And And if I didn't give that petri dish exactly what it required, what happened to that cell? The cell would die off. And so I needed the right nutrients, the right oxygen levels, the right temperature, the right cleanliness, you name it. And if there's any alterations for a prolonged period of time, that cell didn't survive, and we had to start over again. And so it always came down to that cell requires sufficiency, it requires purity. So if we look at the opposite, there's two causes of disease, deficiency and toxicity. And then when you go down the pyramid even more, then there's 6 influences. And so nutrition is going to be the big one we're going to talk about today. But this is where I also run into the roadblock with people who are like, hey, my diet's on par, my macros are on par, but I'm still not getting where I want to go. And that's where you have to look at the chemical side, the physical, mental, emotional, medical. There's more to the puzzle than just what we're talking about today. Today's a starting point, but just keep that in the back of the mind as we go through questions. We're going to talk more in generalities because each one has a specific story and kind of path to where they get there. So the why, the what, and the how of keto. So Dre kind of mentioned there's good rumors out there, there's bad rumors. So what have you guys heard, or what are you curious about?
HDLs and LDLs.
So cholesterol, good. We'll get to that later.
Candy fruit.
What's that?
Candy fruit.
Oh, fruit. Gotcha. Nature's candy.
I got a question about the disease known as ketoacidosis, where that came from and how,
Perfect.
you know what I mean? That's
Good.
my big comment.
All right. We'll talk about that too. I got that lined up.
I think for the differences, I think I understand the differences between like paleo and keto, but when I did paleo hardcore, like I really struggled with energy to
Okay.
like come to the gym to like,
Gotcha.
yeah.
Okay.
What about one of the things, because I've tried this before and I was pretty successful with it. But one of the things I never really understood, the science behind it, is when you're in a state of ketosis, how long should you stay in the state of ketosis? Do you need to remain in the state of ketosis? Is it okay to fluctuate out? How to break that fast, right? Because
Yeah.
often what I did was intermittent fasting with the keto diet as well. And that was, like I said, very successful. But how do you break the fast? What does that look like? And how long should you remain in a state of ketosis that's safe?
Okay.
And I think to piggyback off that, like, how do you make it more of your lifestyle? Because I think, like, reality is, you know, on a weekend if you want, like, or you go on vacation, like, what does that look like? Because I feel like so much of these is like, it sounds really good, but how do you like make it
Yeah.
just part of your like everyday life?
Cool. All right. I think I'm on track with what I prepared. So things should be covered. So the what behind keto. So keto just basically is just short for ketogenic, which means you are burning ketones as fuel. And so ketones are fat, where we have glucose as sugar. And so the difference is your body is amazing at using whatever fuel source it can get to and use it as energy. Where if you tried to put diesel fuel in a gasoline engine, that engine's not going to work so well, and you're going to do a lot of damage. So for these two basic things, glucose is more of a quick burning fuel. Ketones is more a slow burning fuel. Glucose will be more, they'll call it more dirty. Like there's a lot more oxidation and kind of byproducts of it. And then ketones are essentially a cleaner kind of fuel. And so when someone says, I'm going keto, there's where kind of an umbrella starts to happen. They could be like, hey, I'm actually tracking my ketones. They could just say, in theory, I'm eating more fat. Or sometimes people say, I'm going keto, which means they're just going lower carb. And so there's going to be variations and differences within those. I wouldn't say one's right, one's wrong. I guess if you're a true keto person, then you would be told you're wrong, because unless you're tracking keto, then ketones, then you're not doing keto, and you'll be shunned from their Facebook page. So, not speaking from experience. Now, the why behind keto, for me, from a practitioner standpoint, I think everyone wants hormone regulation, but I think the one hormone that's probably the most important out of any of them is insulin. And so I think if you can regulate this hormone, you're going to be ahead of 98% of the population. And so we look at the journey of insulin itself. The first thing is that it regulates sugar. So let's say you have the standard American breakfast of a Heart Smart cereal, some orange juice, and a coffee. What's going to happen to your blood sugars, you think?
It's gonna spike.
Right. They're going to spike. And the body never does stupid stuff. It says, hey, here's some high blood sugar. This has a potential dangerous situation. What I'm going to do, if I'm not going to use it now, is I'm going to store it. And so there's where insulin comes in to store it. Where do you think we store sugar? What's that?
Liver?
Yes. So the liver is actually the first place we store insulin, store sugar as glycogen, but we only have about a day's worth of energy there. So it's like, I'm going to shut that down, and then your body will store this sugar as glycogen, and what would be the next tissue, what do you think? Muscle, exactly. So again, we only have about a day's worth of energy stored up there. So now we've got that full, and now the body's got to search for somewhere else to store this excess energy. So there's where it packs it in as a triglyceride. And so a triglyceride is going to be 3 fatty acids with a sugar backbone. And here's where the whole cholesterol thing, and I'll get more about later, got like destroyed, is because scientists looked at the fat component of cholesterol opposed to the sugar component. And so fat got attacked opposed to sugar, and that's where the division happened. But anyway, triglycerides will circulate, and then it'll get deposited where? Where's the easiest place we gain weight? Kind of from here to here, right? Our butt, gut, and thighs. And so those will go up. So that can affect cardiac output, can affect insulin resistance, those things. Vitamin C. Insulin will affect vitamin C. What do we know vitamin C is beneficial for? Immune system, right? So everyone says load up on it. Vitamin C and sugar are virtually identical. And so they will compete to get into the same cell from the same entry point. So if we have trouble regulating sugar, we're going to block out vitamin C absorption. So look at flu season from mid-October till we're kind of still in it. And look what's happening there. We go from Halloween to Thanksgiving to Christmas to New Year's to Valentine's Day to Easter to Mardi Gras. And what's the overall theme of those holidays? Sugar. So I wouldn't say it's this magical bug that destroys us during those months, but that we have an overload of sugar and an underabsorption of, say, vitamin C and supporting immune system. Insulin will regulate magnesium. So remember, insulin's a storage hormone. Whatever nutrients you intake, that has to be stored somehow. What does magnesium do to your muscles? Helps them relax. So we hear a lot of people with restless leg and muscle cramping and those types of things. Magnesium is also involved in over 300 energy reactions in the body. So if we're not regulating that, if we're not able to absorb that, guess what happens to energy? Tanks. Think about your blood vessels. They're muscles. If you can't relax your blood vessels, what's going to happen to them? They get shorter, tighter, and what happens to blood pressure? We start going up. So while people will take magnesium to help with that, I would argue take a step back further and look at your insulin load and your sugar load and making sure that's regulated. Insulin will help us retain sodium. So there's another knock against blood pressure. Insulin will help regulate calcium. If we can't get calcium into the cell and we pee it out, what happens to bone density? There we go. So thyroid. So when our thyroid releases a hormone, T4, the inactive version, it has to be converted through the liver to the active version, T3. If the liver's full and it can't listen to that signal anymore, what happens to that thyroid conversion? Down. So I would argue if you have a thyroid problem, you probably have an insulin problem. Insulin will age us, literally. These are called advanced glycosylated end products. So, has anyone ever had an A1C tested? Yeah. I think everyone should have an A1C tested. An A1C is a marker of blood sugars over a 90 to 120 day blood span. And what it is hemoglobin, which is from your red blood cells, is a protein, gets attached to a sugar, and it creates this AGE, advanced glycosylated end products. So if you've ever burnt toast, can you unburn toast? No, that's an example of that. You try to scrape it off, and so the body has to attack it, and so this creates major inflammatory situations, and your body's always in constant attack mode. And so pain usually goes up with those. But if we look at it from a CrossFit perspective, if we have these unregulated insulin, we can't store sugar, it may attach to collagen. So think collagen is the main protein in muscles and joints and tendons and ligaments. And the main function of collagen is to hold on to water. And so if we're not holding on to water, what's going to happen to your recovery of muscles, your stiffness factor, your pain factor? So as a chiropractor, I always see pain people coming in, but when it's like system-wide, I'm like, we have more than just an injury to that component to it. We usually have these going on. We talked about energy. The lining of your arteries. These are the least resistant to insulin in your cells. So insulin isn't just a storage hormone. It's what we call a mitogenic hormone. If you remember from high school biology, one cell becomes 2, and then 4, and then 8. So those cells will start to rapidly divide within your artery or linings. If you have more cells dividing, what happens to the diameter of that blood vessel? We get smaller. So now we start getting blockages. We get increase in blood pressure, those types of things. Cancer, again, if insulin is making cells divide a lot quicker than normal, it's a major influence in any cancer, especially site-specific hormone ones. Amyloid plaques, this one's more in my family, of my dad being Alzheimer's. The same plaque that you find in the brain is a response from insulin. So one of the things they're looking at with Alzheimer's is calling it type 3 diabetes. So an insulin resistance of the brain. And we never had dinner without potatoes and dessert. So we talked about the butt, gut, thighs, and then to drive it all, as insulin gets out of control, it's toxic and then sends your body into a state of protective mode. So think fight or flight, or in the middle of a CrossFit workout, you're always in that state internally. Recovery goes down, energy is going to tank, and just you're setting yourself up for a whole lot of things. So this is why I favor a keto style or a fat favored one, is because the better we can regulate insulin, the better longevity factor we can have. Now the how. How do we do keto? Anyone tried it, like full on tracking ketones and half and half-ish? Some jazz hands out there. Which I'm trying to get my 6-year-old son to believe that all the top soccer players, when they score a goal, do jazz hands. So I don't think he's buying it, but I can't wait. But so this is kind of the macro breakdown of a traditional keto diet, where, do you guys know what macro means? So it's your fats, your carbs, your proteins. And so the only way you're going to get to a macro breakdown is you actually have to track every single thing that you put in your mouth, from your food to your beverages, whatever it is. And so a keto diet, to start with, usually is only 5% carbs. So for math's sake, if we base this on 2,000 calories, you're getting about 25 grams of carbs a day. An apple is about 22 grams. So you eat an apple, you're kind of screwed the rest of the day if you're tracking your thing. So there's kind of the fruit component to it. I could say, yes, you could have fruit, but you've used up a major budget at that portion of it. What's that?
Chop it into 4 and everything.
Yeah, exactly. Protein is about 20%, and then fat is about 75%. So this is usually where people start as far as their meal plate, so to speak. Take this to your cardiologist, and what are they going to do? Yeah, they're going to freak out because there's no whole grains on there, and there's no cereal, and there's no pasta, and there's no carbs. And I think it's interesting with that, like if you look back at how cholesterol got a bad rap, it started in about 1918. It was this Russian scientist where he fed rabbits a high cholesterol diet and realized, hey, this creates plaquing in their arteries. What's wrong with that picture? Do rabbits eat bacon? No. So when you feed a species food that's not designed for that species, something bad's going to happen. And then they kind of quantified that onto humans and blame cholesterol and all that. So this is the way to start it out from a macro standpoint. Now, when we're looking at your actual meal plate, this can be another strategy for it. Remember, if you're not coming into carbs, your body's like, I got to find fuel source elsewhere. And if we have excess stored fuel, we're going to use that. And so a lot of times to start a keto-ish diet or moving that direction is to actually don't put anything on your plate, is to fast. Did anyone eat breakfast this morning? Just a handful.
Discount?
There's where you get into technicalities, depending on what you put in it. Did you put it?
Butter and sus panes. Heavy cream.
Yeah, so like from a pure like legalistic standpoint of fasting, like any calorie, they're going to be like, nope, you've destroyed it. I'm going to get to the realistic aspect of it with what I do with a lot of my clients, what I do personally, and all that type of thing. But from a legalistic standpoint, they'd be like, nope, you've broken your fast. And so the questions. So this is kind of what you guys have already hinted on. And I would say before we get to kind of these specific answers, it's always going to be kind of come back to what's the pain of the situation, what do you hope to gain, and then what's your goal. And this is going to be different. So someone's like, hey, my pain is I have too much weight. My gain is I can fit into this dress for my goal to show up my 20-year high school reunion. So if it's only like a short-term thing, that's different than someone's like, hey, I have this raging history of Alzheimer's like in my family, so my goal is to be like, okay, when I'm 74 like my dad, I want to be able to have conversations. So it's going to be kind of a generalized answers to these things, but keep that in mind. So this was submitted. I work out at 5 a.m. I want info on what to eat following a heavy Metcon while getting benefits of fasting. So I'll start with that. The benefits of fasting, really you can't eat if you're trying to get the benefits of fasting. So I would say just extend your fast out. And so what I do with a lot of my clients is eat between a 8 to 10 hour time frame. So even if you work out early, I would say push that breakfast out. You're still having breakfast, you're just breaking that fast later in the day. So if you went 10 to 6, you can eat a good portion of calories to keep you sustained and full and pretty satisfied throughout the day. How long should fast be? Again, it's going to be based on what are you looking for? Are you looking to get into true ketosis? Then you're probably going to need longer. I had a patient just went on a 90-hour fast, but he was doing intermittent fasting every day for about 20 hours. He'd only eaten a 4-hour window. And so he was kind of conditioned for that. I would say get comfortable with the idea of doing like a 24-hour fast. So have dinner one night and then don't eat till dinner the next night. Do it on a day you're not going to do CrossFit or your activity level is not going to be super high, just so you're not burning through resources that way. And then what should macros and calorie intake look like for a CrossFitter? Again, what's the CrossFitter's goal? Are they games level? They have earning potential for their CrossFit, or are we Joe Schmoes at 5 a.m. like me? I'll get to that in a second of what I do. Keto can be restrictive. Is there a day every now and then we can take an extra carbs and still maintain lifestyle majority of the time? Again, I would say to take in extra carbs and maintain ketosis is probably not realistic, but take a day and have I hate using the word cheat day because I don't want you to reward yourself for doing good and then you're like, now I'm cheating. Live life type of thing. And so again, look, what's your longer term goals? Always play it against how do I feel? Am I at my fitness level I want to be, and how do I function? Because I've had people doing a true keto thing, and they were miserable. And I've had people that were cheating the whole time, and they were miserable. So it kind of depends. It comes back to what's your main goal with that. Yeah.
With the fasting part,
Yeah.
what I noticed was after in ketosis, going in a few weeks, 4 weeks in,
Yeah.
fasting became easier because my cravings were less and
Yep.
I felt full longer.
Cool.
So my husband tried to fast the first 2 weeks in and he failed miserably.
Yeah.
He said you're not at that point where you're not craving stuff.
Yeah.
So if you're a first timer, I think waiting a little longer, until you're in 4 weeks will help with fasting.
Nice.
It's not that hard after.
No, and you could even start, like, I would start at a 12-hour fast, so go 7 to 7 type of thing, and get comfortable with that, and then take a half hour to an hour off, and take a half hour, like, and just kind of progress and build up to it that way.
And do sleeping hours count, right?
Yeah, definitely. Yep. Unless you're like, I don't know, night eating or something.
8 hours, you've been fasting for 8 hours.
Yeah, exactly.
Best way.
Yep. Yeah. So use your sleep to your advantage in that whole time frame. So kind of the 5 a.m. CrossFitter that I fall into that category. So this is my personal like macro aspect of it. And so how did I base on 2,100 calories? That was just kind of how I felt. Like at one point I was at 18 for a while, and I'm like, all right, I'm kind of hungry quite a bit more. So I bumped it up. And this is kind of during the CrossFit Open time frame, and I'm like, okay, I feel like I'm recovering a little bit better. So what I end up being is about 55% fat, 30% protein, and 15% carb. So I'm probably not in ketosis at all during that time frame, but I'm more fat favored, more fat dominant, and for me, that's what works. So if you're new to any of this, I'd probably start with 50% fat, 35% protein, 15% carb, and see where you function with that. And that's where you start to alter and start to kind of play with the numbers. Is cyclical keto diet effective? Do I really need to stop eating fruit? How much protein? Is there benefit to high fat, low carb instead of a keto? And I would say yes, maybe. Depends, and yes. So I would say you can use keto as a tool. You can use any nutrition as a tool. You may go vegan for a time frame just to clean stuff up. I'm not a fan of it, but if you went from standard American diet to vegan, you'd probably have some great results because you've cut out a bunch of crap. For me, I come from a family of apple farmers, and so an apple is ingrained in my DNA that, like, if you put me on a deserted island, I could live off steak and apples and be good to go for a lifetime. How much protein? Again, that will depend. Are you trying to get into true ketosis? Sometimes your protein's higher than it should be, and you have to back that down, because at some point your body may use protein, convert it to sugar, and use that glucose as fuel, and then you're kind of screwed on the ketone aspect of it. And then is there benefit to high fat, low carb? And I would say that's probably more where I put my diet personally into, and where a lot of people I start transitioning to, and then, yeah, if they want to go more strict, they do it and kind of see how they feel. Vacation time, what do I do? If I go off keto is bad, how long to get back into ketosis? So with vacations, I think we always kind of have a place that has a kitchen. Like we don't really, and for cost sake, we've got 3 kids, so it's easier for us to go to a grocery store and bring the food in and cook it and do all that stuff. If we do a restaurant, like I'm a huge burger fan, so I'll get whatever's on that burger and just not the bun and just eat it with a fork and knife on the plate. And then like vegetables or salad as the side type of thing. If you go off keto, is that bad? Not unless you're like the keto police or something. Like, and then how long to get back? That's going to depend on, like, there's many factors on how to get back into that, like the big variables for that. So that would have to be like you're tracking ketones, you know you're in ketosis before going off and then trying to get back. That's for fasting. Like, so yeah, like there's a ton of factors involved with that. So a vacation is just more planning ahead and looking more at, maybe you want to do more of a carnivore kind of diet if you're going out to eat more type of thing. So have the burgers, have the fish, have the veggies. So here's the ketosis and ketoacidosis aspect of it. So as a diabetic, is eating a good thing? As a blanket statement, I would say keto would be a phenomenal thing for diabetic, whether type 1 or type 2, because it's all about insulin regulation. And so if you were to lower your carb load as a type 1, that means you have to inject less insulin. You're going to have way more cost savings. And the thing is, a type 1 could then actually create a type 2 situation if you become now resistant to the insulin that you are injecting, and the cells get toxic with it. So I would say it's a good thing. The problem is your doctor's going to freak out when they hear keto, because ketosis and ketoacidosis sound a lot alike. It's like meat and feet. Like, give me a meat sandwich, and you're like, I thought you said a feet sandwich, and it's like, well, no, two different things. So ketosis is used as ketones as your fuel. Ketoacidosis is you don't have enough insulin to recognize, hey, I have these carbs coming in. They're not being stored. So the body says, I'm in a starvation standpoint, so now I'm going to use my reserves and start dumping ketones into the system. And I'm just going to keep dumping and keep dumping and keep dumping because there's no checkpoint of, hey, I'm full or I've had enough. And so ketoacidosis, like it'll be based on your ketone levels. That's when you're getting up into like 15 and 30 millimole per whatever liter. That's a dangerous situation. Under like 5 and 3.5 and less, that's more of a ketone aspect of it. Like Noah, he's in ketosis right now. Like babies are keto machines when they're born. Their fuel is fat. And so, no, it's not a dangerous thing. Ketoacidosis is, ketosis is not. And the only way to track it and kind of know the difference is you have to actually either do the blood test for ketones or P-strip or those types of things.
Well, how accurate are those Walgreens P-strips?
I would say the blood tests are definitely way more accurate. They're just a lot.
Single, let's say I'm trying to make sure that I'm like already in ketosis or whatever. Are those effective enough that when I use it?
I think it's going to give you a good ballpark, yeah. Yep. Yeah, the blood strips are a lot more effective and accurate. They're just pricey. They're like $4 to $6 per strip type of thing. So it depends on how much you're checking it. It can add up pretty quickly.
How often would you suggest that you measure that to make sure you're in the safe zone, if you will? Is that something you need to do daily, weekly, bi-weekly, monthly?
I think starting off probably daily, just so you know, like, hey, when I consume this, I'm at this level. Like if you change it drastically, then I'd probably do it more often just to make sure, yeah, just feedback so you're not, yeah.
Once you have your diet kind of played out on paper, it shouldn't really change.
It shouldn't, no. I mean, like I said, there'll be other factors. Maybe stress levels affect it. Maybe, like, I don't know, chemical factor, those types of things, but yeah.
Rowing 2,000 meters.
Yeah, you work out.
I don't know, my butt and shoulders.
I'm a bored eater. I don't know what that means. Like, is it bored with the food that you're eating or bored like this? I don't know.
No, it means like when you're bored, you eat.
Oh, okay, so like an emotional eater type of thing?
I'm the diabetic, that's my question.
Okay.
So, I'm also a bored eater.
I think there's where fasting can come into play. So you know you're restricted. And it also, like, when I went to do a 24-hour fast, it turned up like a 40-hour. But like, I realized it was like on a weekend doing nothing. I'm like walking into the kitchen and I'm like, why am I here? Like, I'm not hungry. Like, I'm not. Yeah, so it was more of an emotional wake-up call to me and be like, it's just out of habit and those types of things. So I think that's where the fasting can come into play.
But being diabetic,
Yeah.
can you fast for that? I can't fast for that long. Won't I die? I'm pretty sure I would grow. I don't know that I could.
There'd be a lot more factors in. Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't recommend it like in a blanket statement right here, but yeah.
I just want to comment on the board eating part. It's doing intermittent fasting, having a set window has really helped a lot to be able to control the emotional board.
Cool. Yeah, so she said the fasting helps.
My friend who has type 1 diabetes is the one that kind of got me into doing keto, and there's a big difference between you just started keto and when you're what they call fat adapted, and I don't know if you're going to talk about that at all, but like once your body is used to using fat as a fuel, you will find that fasting is way easier, and it just kind of happens naturally. You're just not hungry because your body is way more efficient in using the fuel that you're carrying around with you versus like having to take in that fuel from somewhere else. So she fasts just kind of naturally because it just happens. But you also have to make sure that you're maintaining your blood sugar at an adequate level. So her fasting is not as strict. Like if her blood sugar gets to the point where she needs to eat something, she eats something. Right. So like you can't be like, I'm going to fast for 24 hours. Like no, like if your blood sugar gets too low, you're going to have to eat something. No.
I got the same experience as I'm a fat boy since I'm a big kid. I just started it because a friend of mine just did it. And I've been like in and out like for the last couple months. But finally in the last 2 months I kind of got into the right path, and fasting is something that scares me right now because I don't get hungry. It happened that I got breakfast on already, prepped from last night, and I look at it, I don't want to eat. It's like I don't feel it, and I just push myself to eat like a little at least half of it. And most of the time, my wife ends up eating it the next day.
Yeah, that's the thing. Like like if you're not hungry, like don't force it. Like yeah.
When I went to eat, I was like, give me that, and let me order this on top of that. Just
right.
And that's how I big about it.
That's the thing. Like your body has more intelligence in an underfed and over movement state than a overfed and under movement state.
But I don't know if you're still going in the line of that question. My other concern is that I'm even though I've been always fat, I'm really active. I like hiking, I like mountain biking, I like basketball, I like gym.
Yeah.
But my strength, I can do feel it that I'm still debating. Oh, I need to probably get a nutritionist or something to help me out to get the correct probably ingredients in my food or parts of the meal that will help me spike a little bit of my energy and keep staying in ketosis.
Yep. Yeah, so it's just going to be some play and tweaking and just experience with it. So yeah.
Well, I think to piggyback on that statement, when we look at the traditional keto, I think that's very much, this is my opinion, but very much for a diseased state. I think that to go that direction first would be like, I've really got something going on that I need to take care of right now medically. I think that there are a lot of ways that we can get there and work ourselves in that direction by reducing our carbohydrates a little bit at a time and feeling out, because it is self-experimentation, where you feel strong, where you have energy, whatever the case may be. So maybe reducing those carbohydrates a little bit at a time and changing your levels until you find that sweet spot.
I went all in.
Yeah.
Carbs out.
Well, and that's the thing. Your body's used to burning one fuel for so long, and you take it out, and it's like it's a freak out mode of like, yeah.
I said I was on and off for a couple months.
Yeah.
It's because I stayed 2-3 months and I still don't feel that I was losing nothing. It's
Yeah.
because I still wasn't in keto adapted.
Yeah.
So my body was still not used to ketones, so I never really got into it.
Right.
So this time I said, let's give it a long time. I did like, I'm going to do 2 weeks and then have like a cheat day and then 2 weeks. That usually works when you're doing like small, like calorie counting or portion control. It doesn't work when you're doing keto. Right? In my experience, maybe not now.
Yeah.
Maybe when I get to the weight that I want and I can take those breaks every 2 weeks or whatever. I don't know if that's safe or not. But right now, I think that this is trying to extend it as much as I can.
So what I see a lot is, so the average American consumes 300 grams of carbs a day. So when people take that away, that's like 1,200 calories, and oftentimes they're not replacing it with something. So then their calorie gets way too low, and like so there's where you have to like.
And they don't know where they're getting the two also.
Yeah.
Secondary food stuff.
I think that's also an important point too, is you can get into what some people call low carb purgatory, which is that you're taking away all those carbs, but if you actually look at the amount of fat that you're consuming, it's not nearly enough.
Yeah.
So making sure like you have to replace that energy with something else. And if you're just taking away the carbs, but not increasing your fat intake, you literally have nothing that you're running off of, and you will be so miserable.
Yeah.
My analogy is, so I got a lot of vegetables. I got extra. Let's see if I can use them.
Right. Will cholesterol go up? Yes, but why does it matter? There's a thing. Can you name a study that increase in cholesterol causes heart disease? No. We are at historic low cholesterol levels of nationwide, and we're at historically high levels of heart disease. When you look at what cholesterol is, it's just a building block. It's the building block of your estrogen, your progesterone, your testosterone, your vitamin D, your cortisol, your aldosterone, most of your hormones. It's the building block of every single cell wall. It's the building block of your brain, your spinal cord, your nervous system, whatever it is. I see way more issues with low cholesterol in chronic illness than high cholesterol.
So what is exactly the difference between doing that?
There isn't. That was sold to you by a company that has a pill to tell you if something is good or bad.
So, but when you take a blood test, you get graded on both?
Yes, and it's a faulty grading system. So I'm not concerned with cholesterol at all. Where I would be concerned with cholesterol is you can get deeper into it and you can look at particle size. So we have LDL and HDL, but they're not created equally. There's small versions of each that can get into nooks and crannies and then get damaged and then create issues. But I would look at more inflammatory factors like homocysteine and CRP and A1C and ferritin. The inflammatory factors for me scare me way more than your cholesterol numbers altogether. Will my muscles waste away? Again, it depends. Like, if you're not lifting weights, then yes, I don't care what you're eating. Like, you need to challenge muscle. It's Wolf's Law. Whatever challenge you put on them, your body will grow and adapt to that. Same with bone density. Now, how much, kind of a simple way to track how much protein you should be getting. So lean body mass. So take your total weight. So this is my numbers. So I'm 168 minus my body fat. So 10%. So I got 151 pounds of lean body mass. And then multiply it 0.8, and that's kind of the number of grams of proteins you would need per day to maintain your lean muscle mass. So that's a generic equation you can look at and be like, okay, where should I be on the protein scale starting this out? Now, for me, I'm probably in the 160 to 180 grams a day because of the CrossFit aspect of it. I feel I recover better with theirs. But if you're doing nothing, you probably wouldn't need much more than that each day. So kind of like a resting, lazy day aspect of it.
So I should target my rest days differently. That or let's say I'm this week, some weekends, maybe gym's closed or something, or I'm injured, let me take a break, cut it down. Should I then also increase my...
I would, yeah.
Okay.
What are exogenous ketones and can they help? So one of the ones you'll see usually in supplement form is beta hydroxybutyrate, and that's what your body makes from fatty acids to be used as energy. So you can take that, or you can create it endogenously, so from your own body, or you can take it externally, called exogenous ketones. And can it help? And I'm actually kind of on the fence on this one. I think it's almost, if you have weight to lose, I would prefer you make it internally. Because let's say you're taking an external energy source, you're going to burn that first and maybe not have enough energy requirements to burn the rest. So you're kind of just recycling this fuel type of thing. If you want to do some extended fasting, I would say this is probably where they help more, is giving you some energy that's not a carb hit and those types of things to help keep you through that fast and not get super hungry and things like that. So I would say more in a fasting state, I see people have more benefit with these than using them as a fuel source on a daily basis.
Can I piggyback on that question? Somewhere I read somebody stating that if you add in exogenous ketones, that prevents your body from continuing to break down on their own, or like resistant to it. Is that very true to that?
I don't know if it's resistant or more so like, hey, here's a readily available fuel source, I'm going to use that, opposed to what I have to work a little bit harder to use what I already have stored up. I think an also thing, like, I don't know. I've tried a number of them, just self-experimenting, and like not to be gross, but like they run through me really quickly. It's not like, yeah, it's not a feel-good moment. So I found one company that doesn't, like, so I've used them more so, but I've tried other ones. And I'm like, excuse myself from the patient, and I have to go. Difference between keto and, say, paleo, low carb, Atkins, and carnivore. I think if you look at keto versus all of them, keto is the one that really measures. So you have to do a lot more work on keto as far as measuring what you're eating, intake, ketones. It's a lot more systematic, those types of things. I would say I do a paleo style diet with a fat preferred macro component, I guess you would say. So with paleo, it's more the types of foods, where keto is more the macros of foods and breakdown of it. So you could do a vegan version of keto. You're using a fat source of those types of things. Low carb, yeah, you just like arbitrarily, like you just like decreasing your carbs, which there's not much like quantification behind that. Like you could have 300 carbs one day, and the next day you have 250. You're like, hey, I went lower carb today. Like, so it doesn't really matter. Atkins, again, no, that was in the first phase was 0 carb. It was all just meat basically, and then you had another phases with it, and there was no restriction or no counting of calories. It was kind of eat as much as you want anytime. And then carnivore is just pure meat. You'll hear more and more of that. That one's gaining some steam and things like that. And honestly, that can be used as a really good tool for autoimmune stuff, helping heal that gut lining up.
Couldn't that also be dangerous, though, just eating meat? I mean, with our food industry and the foods that we're getting, all the hormones that, I mean, you really probably have to be specific where you purchase your meat and what type of meat you're getting?
Yeah, I mean, quality is always going to trump
Yeah.
any of these things, yeah. And that's the thing, that's what keto will shoot people in the foot too, is they're not using quality food, and so, yeah. So, I mean, you could have ice cream as your 20 grams of carb for the day, like, in a macro-focused thing. You could have, yeah. Can I have alcohol on keto? Everyone's got frowns on this one. What's that? Again, I would say this one can fall in like the exogenous ketones. Like when we consume alcohol, your body will convert it to acetate, and that'll be a fuel source, and you'll burn that before anything else. So until that's burned off, you're not going to burn through your other stores. So depending on kind of quantity of alcohol, type of alcohol, frequency of alcohol, like that's where it can be another shot in the foot. Resources. So how to make this work. MyFitnessPal is probably an app I try to have all my patients on. The cool thing with them is, one, they have a barcode scanner, so it's an app. So if you're using stuff from out of a package, you can just scan that. There's a ton of restaurants in it, so you can search the restaurant. A lot of times their menu will come up, so you can then just plug and play food items there. I just use the free aspect of it, so there's a paid version too. I haven't played with that one. And then kind of starting out, the one on the right, this is from active.com. So this is like, if you're like, I don't know where to start with my calories to then create my macros, a kind of equation based on your height and weight and age. There's your basal metabolic rate. So if you did nothing, this is how much calories you would need that day just to function basically. So for me, I would need 1,700, where you saw I usually base mine on 2,100. So this is like would be a non-active, a non-workout day. And then this other one on the left, the Bio Keto, that's the macro calculator, so you can plug in your the calories you get from that, and then play with your percentages to see what kind of number of grams you would get. So just kind of easy tools for it. And then probably a book I would say starting out with would be this one called just Keto, from Maria and Craig Emmerich. Super easy read. Recipes in there. They also have these cool charts like matching different foods and their nutrient content. So like, hey, if I'm eating more fat focused, am I not getting XYZ nutrients. And so it kind of dispels some of those myths. If I eat beef, well, I'm not getting vitamin whatever. But if you eat beef liver, like, they think beef liver is kind of like the superfood of everything. But yeah.
So multivitamins, to keep it as a daily routine.